Hello, my name is Laird, and I will be going over the Blood Wedding play, written in 1932 by Federico Garcia Lorca, performed in Madrid, Spain in 1933. I also want to add that it was performed in New York in 1935, and I added some posters of previews of the play, and I like these posters because it has symbolism, which is a very big contributor to the play. The symbolism being the horse. I also added the resources to the end of the presentation as well, but I also added the information for the the plays I had watched. So let's get into it. The summary. So the Blood Wedding is a three-act tragedy that takes place in the rural area of Spain, where it sees a bridegroom planning to marry a bride, and with the bride having doubts about the wedding because she is still in love with Leonardo, her old ex-fiance. And this play is very symbolic, and it has symbolism throughout the whole play. And it also taps into the societal expectations of Mr. Federico's time period, and also the uncontrollable passion that he himself had, which I will explain when I get into his biography. Um, but this play followed the typical dramatic structure, following in these four characters: the bridegroom, his mother, the bride, and Leonardo. And now I will get into the historical context and the symbolism movement, which was a movement that came about in the late 19th century. Um, I want I I want to go over the symbolism, all the symbolism throughout this play, but I would be going on for hours. There is so much symbolism from beginning to end, in pretty much everything, in pretty much every object. Um, this play was also um, tapped into the societal norms, as I said, which were a problem during that time period, as nobody was really unique or different, and everybody was kind of just um, only experiencing the norms. But this play also goes over the consequences that would have happened if you were to disobey the societal norms. So next, I do want to go over the characters, and I'm going to talk more about the societal norms, which is basically why the characters aren't named properly. So all these characters have a societal norm to play, except for Leonardo, which I'll talk about later. But like the bridegroom has to be the bridegroom, and the bride has to be the bride, the mother has to be a mother. I feel like they all tie in to the societal norms that they have to be until they betray them, ultimately facing the consequences. The mother, I feel like her motivation was ultimately just to keep her son safe and uh, be there for his wedding as a mother. That's pretty much all she wanted to do until she found out the information that um, the bride had later been with Leonardo Felix, that they were ex-fiancés, and I feel like she didn't tell her son that, which ultimately got him killed, which was the mother betraying her societal norm by not telling her son the vital information. And then the bridegroom, which was the young man who was making plans to marry the bride, and he tied into the societal norm because he was very excited. He was the bridegroom. He acted as a bridegroom all up until Leonardo eventually took the bride and led her away, and that ultimately made the bridegroom very jealous, and he stormed after them, ultimately getting himself killed. So he acted as the bridegroom up until he didn't, which ultimately got himself killed. Same with the mother. She acted as a mother until she didn't, making it so her son died not knowing this information. Same with the bride. The bride and her motivations. She was motivated to get married at first until she had the interaction with Leonardo at the wedding. That interaction caused a flip to switch in her brain. All of a sudden, she didn't want to get married. She just wanted to be with Leonardo. So she was betraying the societal norm of being a bride by wanting to have an affair with Leonardo, which caused her to go out into the woods and get Leonardo and the bridegroom killed. And then Leonardo, being um, the last free member of the Felix family, I say that because the Felix family and the bridegroom family have been in an ongoing affair, or family feud, I mean, which has led to all of the Felix family members either being imprisoned or killed. And so he is the last free family member, and they had to break up because he couldn't support the bride. So she left him very emotionally, I assume. And so they ended up moving on, and he became a new husband and a new father for these kids. And he was a father, and he was happy until he heard the bride was getting married. And then the switch flipped, and then he started not liking his life, and not liking his wife, and not liking his son, which caused him to eventually try and escape with the bride, which caught them, um, which brought him into the woods, ultimately ending up in his demise. The next thing I'm going to be looking over is the play structure. So this play was pretty much performed in every adaptation pretty much the same. There wasn't really any drastic changes that happened. The play was usually around 90 minutes long. I read one adaptation of this play, and I watched two. So I like to think I have a pretty decent sense of what this play was like being performed. Um, I also noticed that the playwrights liked to add different symbolism during the play, like a lot of a lot of the scenes had symbolism, of course, as I explained, and like this play right here didn't have a moon character, which the moon was a very symbolic thing during the play as well, and I liked how this playwright used the moon as a symbolic character during the play, as well as this play didn't have the flower crown that symbolized um, a new start, and how the bride's character didn't throw that down in this play. Um, I thought it was cool that they added the flower crown into that one, and to symbolize how she didn't want the new start, how she wanted to be with Leonardo. I thought it was very clever. Also, the language and dialogue. I kind of mentioned this before when I mentioned that they had the switch in their hair, their head, that the the bride had and Leonardo had, when they started neglecting their significant other, and because they wanted to be together. Um, I thought was very cool that they added the switch to make the audience know that they needed to be together, that they really wanted to be together, and that they were distressed. And same with when I explained earlier how the bride was very excited, and how he didn't notice how um, the bride was kind of just moping around, and like she didn't want to be at the wedding. She said everything was moving too fast, and the bridegroom didn't realize this. There, or he didn't realize this, um, pretty much causing the events to happen. And they used song and dance throughout both of these plays to pretty much narrate what the scene was, and what was going on throughout the play. The next thing I want to look at is, of course, the writer's biography. And the reason I mentioned Leonardo in the biography is because I feel like Leonardo and Federico have very similar have a very similar story because I wrote a little biography summary about the writer that you can read while I talk about this. But um, in 1925, Federico was passionately involved with Salvador Dali, which caused him to find out he was a homosexual, but he didn't, even though he didn't really accept it, and nor did society. So he was, by to an extent, betraying the societal norms and becoming a homosexual, which was basically the same thing Leonardo was doing. He had this um, um, desire to marry the bride and be with the bride, just like Federico had this desire to be with Salvador. And they were both disproved by society. They both were not, but they were both betraying society if they decided to pursue that, which unfortunately ended in both of their demise, as it will say down here. Um, Federico was arrested during the Spanish Civil War by nationalist forces and eventually executed on August 18th in 1936. So they both had very uncontrollable desires that unfortunately both ended in their demise. They both had love that couldn't happen, and it both tragically ended. And I think that it's very sad, but also very impressive how Federico's story can connect to Leonardo's story um, even after it's all said and done. I think that was very cool. The next thing I want to focus is how the play was adapted. So this play has been adapted multiple times, ranging from opera to being translated into English, to being told by Spanish and English storytellers in a bilingual kind of play, and also in a film adaptation that was like a musical. So this play has been adapted and has moved through history, I want to say phenomenally. It has aged very well and is still very prominent in our society today. I've seen plays as early as 2019, so this play is very relevant still nowadays. But I want to say that I don't think I think people back then would relate to this play more than people do now, unless you have some sort of like uh, societal urge that is frowned upon, which is very hard to do nowadays. Everything is very accepting than it was back then. So I feel like it would be definitely a little bit more hard to relate to a play like this than it would be like back then when it was really easy to be frowned upon in society because you had to do certain things. That's gonna bring me into my thoughts. And when I first watched this play, I watched the one in the bottom right hand corner. When I first watched it, I didn't really understand it. Like, I understood the basic elements that it was the love triangle and how they wanted to be together but they couldn't be together, and that eventually ended up killing them both. I understood that, but I didn't understand the deeper meaning and the societal norms behind everything, and all of the symbolism behind everything. It made me open my eyes to it, and I feel like it really helped me appreciate this play, and I honestly wouldn't change a thing about it. The only thing I've had some confusion about was maybe the timeline, because it is mentioned that the bride or the bridegroom has been with the bride for around 3 years, or they have known each other for 3 years, and also Leonardo. and the bride were together for 3 years. So I don't know if 3 years align at all, um, or like maybe she was seeing them at the same time. I don't know. But so that was the only thing I was kind of confused about. But I think this play was phenomenal. Both of the adaptations I watched were acted very well. But this one was especially good just because I feel like the production definitely cost, or it definitely had a bigger budget in this adaptation, so that definitely led to the quality that came out. But I loved the play, and I loved watching it, and this will bring me to the end of my slides. These are my references, but thank you for watching. See you.